What's up YouTube? Fred here. Today's video is a little different than the other stuff that I have. It's not going to be part of the normal schedule where it's every Friday that I release a new video. This is just something that I thought might be fun to share. A quick note for anyone who's new to the channel, I do a lot of car and motorcycle related things. Hopefully you find it interesting. If you like my videos, please throw a subscribe and a like my way. And on to the video. Alright, so today's video, I'm going to do an oil change for my tractor. It's a Craftsman garden lawn tractor, pretty straightforward. But the most popular video that I've made so far is actually an oil change I did a couple years ago for a Ducati Hyper. And I figured this might be something I could make a quick video, show people how to do it, talk through a couple of things to consider, and it won't be that long of a video. Alright, so I've got a Craftsman LT2000 tractor. My wife and I bought our house about, actually just over 8 years ago. So anyway, Craftsman tractor, they're pretty garden variety tractor, pun intended I guess. They use a Briggs & Stratton motor. It's very similar to ones that are in some of the John Deere's, some of the Ariens tractors I believe. If you go and search online for oil filters and plugs and all that stuff, you'll find that a lot of the brands all use either the same or very similar motors, and a lot of the parts are interchangeable, which is good. So, here are the things you need to do it. I've got the owner's manual for both the tractor and the motor itself. They give you the motor for the Briggs & Stratton, even though you're using a Craftsman motor. Quick note, notice the front of my catalog here. You want to actually, whenever you're doing stuff like this, I find it's helpful, write some notes for yourself so you know what size wrench to use. So this is a 7/16 drain bolt for the oil. How much oil did it take? 46 to 48 ounces, which actually comes into play a little bit later. What type of oil, how much to buy, and this is critical. Oil drain sleeve is on the bottom shelf, I think I wrote, and oil pan on middle. I just wrote this 5 minutes ago after spending a half hour searching feverishly through my garage to try and find where did I leave the oil drain pan and where did I leave the sleeve. Found the sleeve and I found the drain pan. The sleeve is a little plastic piece that kind of slides up under the bolt so that when you're draining the oil it comes right over the side of the frame, drops down into the pan, and it keeps things a lot neater. Some of the other stuff you're going to need, you'll need the oil. Usually I would buy like a 1 quart jug and I'd buy 2 of those, but you end up with waste, and that's kind of a bummer. You'll notice on here, I wrote to myself 46 to 48 ounces. Well, it just so happens that this oil, where does it say it? 48 ounces right there. So they now sell oil in the exact size you need for that tractor. You'll notice also the oil said Briggs & Stratton. We've got our oil filter. We've got an air filter, spark plug, and fuel filter. Spark plug wrench. And I actually bought the name brand spark plug also. I bought this. This is sort of like a package that I just searched for a couple part numbers on Amazon, and it bundled a couple things, but this is a brand that I can't even pronounce. So I bought the name brand one. We'll see how the cheap one is, but we may end up using the name brand one. So let's get to it. Alright, so this is the tractor. It's a Craftsman LT2000. Bought around, well, it would have been 2012 when we bought it. Pretty run-of-the-mill. I've got a bungee cord here so that it holds the mower deck up and away from the Corvette in the garage. So the first step is that we need to run the motor for about 5 minutes. Just get the oil warmed up and cycling through so that it drains a little bit easier. So let's do that. So we're going to let it run for a couple minutes to warm up, and then we'll do the oil change. Piper? This is my little compadre Piper. She's helping with the oil change. Alright, so here's our drain bolt. It's this square thing. I've got the sleeve here that catches the oil. I've got my drain pan underneath. I've got my 7/16 wrench, and I've got a little persuasion if this is going to be stuck. As far as temperature for the oil, I let it idle between 3 and 5 minutes, enough that you can put your hand on the engine and not burn yourself. If you put your hand on the filter, it should be just a little warm to the touch. That takes a little longer to heat up than the engine block itself. You just want it warm enough that the oil has cycled through a couple times, and that should be more than enough for what you need. So first we're going to loosen it. So as I thought, since I haven't done this in a while, it is stuck. But the way to easily solve that is to get a little bit more leverage with a bigger wrench. And look at that. Loosened right up. Okay, it's finger loose now, so I don't need the wrench. You always want to avoid getting anything oily that you don't have to. So I'm going to just pull. Just about there. There we go. And so now you can see the oil right here dripping out. Drain bolt is actually, put it in front of the camera here. Drain bolt's actually pretty clean other than the part that was dirty. Now I put a wood block under my oil pan so that if it shuffled, because it's not really well supported, it wouldn't actually fall. And you can see the oil pan just jumped there for a second, and it was no big deal. So you want to let this drain out. I would say, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes. As long as you see oil coming out. A lot of people are like, oh, you got to let every single little drop drain out. This is not a high performance engine. This is not something that really has Mobil 1 synthetic or anything. This is a lawn tractor. It's low RPM. It's air cooled. As long as the consistent draining has ended and you've let it drip for a couple minutes, you're fine, at least in my opinion. That's how I've been doing it. The tractor's so far 8 years in. I think I've done 3 oil changes. This will be the 4th, so not a big deal. We'll return when it's done. All right, the next little tip I want to make is that you want to also open up the oil fill bolt, and that allows air to flow all the way through the system. And if there's some oil that's kind of vacuum pumped in there or vacuum sealed in there, now this is pretty dirty, so we're going to put a towel under it to catch any of this dirt. You can see a little bit of steam, or I guess it's probably smoke of some kind coming out. And it's not on there tight, so that's going to let anything extra drain out. You get that really good aroma of fresh oil. Actually, it's not fresh oil, this is old oil. Alright, so it's basically done dripping. So what we're going to do, we're going to take this bolt, we're going to just clean off any of the gump that's gotten on it, any of the gross dirt and stuff. Doesn't have to be spotless, but it has to be relatively clean. So I'm actually dipping it in the old oil to give a little bit more persuasion to any of the stuck dirt. I'm running a thumbnail through the threads and I'm twisting it out, and that'll actually clean the threads pretty well. So I'm going to put the bolt back in. Start with your fingers. And once it's as tight as you can go, you're going to use a wrench. Alright, so you don't have to go nutty. It just has to be enough that it seals. So hand tight is fine. Firmly hand tight, but that's all you got to do. Next step, I'm going to pull this off here. Oil has dripped down onto the frame. I'm going to wipe that off. Then we're going to flip over to the other side and we'll do the filter. Alright, so the next thing is we're going to remove the oil filter, the old one, and we're going to put the new one on. Now, one thing you want to do is you want to take your new oil filter and just hold it next to the other one. Make sure that it seems the same size or pretty darn close to it. One problem is that the part numbers change every couple of years, and this one has no part numbers that are in the original catalog, yet on their website it says it fits, so you just need to be aware of that. But that way you don't take it off and then realize, oh, I don't even have the right thing. Also, after you've done it at least once, you'll recognize what the inside of the filter should look like. The next thing you need is this. This is, I believe it's called a strap wrench, and this basically grips onto it and allows you to tighten, and then it rotates. This one is Craftsman, so I think it's designed for these tractors. So you basically make sure you go left, counterclockwise, but put it on the filter as low as you can. Put it on like so. And it's already turning a little bit. So we're going to go back, reset. And you're just going to do that a few times until it is loose enough you can do it with your hand, which I think we are now. Yep, I can just turn it with my hand. This is gonna get messy. The whole thing's gonna cover everything with oil, and then the filter I'm gonna need to basically drain it out as much as I can, and then put it in a plastic bag, and then you can recycle these, so I'm gonna do that. Starting to go. So the cynical among you are probably going to say, oh, you should have drained the oil, pulled the filter off, etc. Well, I only have one drain pan. This is not a high-performance vehicle. And again, this is something I do every couple of years. A little extra oil that's spent is going to be diluted incredibly much by the new oil that's going in, so nothing to worry about. All right, so we're going to wipe down any oil that's on the side here, being very careful not to get any grit or grime into where these the new filter is going to go. So I'm just wiping away from center for any of the little dust and particulates that have gotten on there. And try to wipe down the frame as best I can. Engine ready for the new filter. So we're going to do two things. One, oil hand. So we've got our new oil here, 48 fluid ounces. It's SAE 30 for this tractor. All the owner's manuals should tell you what kind you want to use. There's a couple different types that are acceptable based on the temperatures of where you're driving the tractor. And so we're going to get our new filter. It's got a O-ring protector on the top, and you can see the new O-ring here. It's very clean, there's nothing on it. And before we do anything too crazy, we're going to do just a test fit. Make sure that the threads align. All right, so that is the right size, which is good. I'm a little relieved for that. So one thing you want to do with a new filter is you want to saturate the inside of the filter with oil, because what's going to happen the first time after we filled this with new oil and started it, the filter is going to be dry, meaning that there's not going to be any oil cycling through it for the first couple seconds. And you always want oil to be in the engine. So basically, you put a little bit in. So you put a little bit of oil in it, and you take a clean finger, dip it in the oil, and you're just gonna moisten the O-ring a little bit. It doesn't have to be covered, saturated. It just has to have a coating all the way around, and that just helps it seal with the metal. And when it's tightening down, it won't bind against the metal. The other thing you're going to do is you're going to take this filter, and I added, a couple tablespoons of oil, maybe a little bit more. And you're just going to rotate it around. Enough oil so that I can see inside that there's a little bit of a pool going through the filter. And you're just going to rotate that around so that it starts to get into all the filament and saturates this. So the second we turn on the motor, there's already going to be oil in the filter, and it'll be able to then start serving fresh oil to the engine. All right, so we've done that. And then you put it on. Now the great part about how things have gone nowadays is this actually says, oil gasket, hand tighten only, check for leaks. So that's as tight as I can do it with my hand, and that's all I need. The compression of the rubber is going to keep it from unwinding on its own, sort of like a rubberized Loctite. So when we start up, we'll check for leaks, which means I got to make sure that frame is pretty clean of any drops of oil. The next step, you clean off the dipstick. I cleaned off the lid a little bit, just so nothing would fall in. And you clean off this. Now this amount of oil should be basically what the engine needs, but we're going to do it probably 3/4, and then we're going to try the dipstick, and then we'll probably put the rest in. One tip for pouring is pour like this, or like this, rather than the spout on the lowest point, because since this thing's just about full, it's going to pour almost immediately. So that's about 3/4. Just want to be sure you're not somehow accidentally overfilling it. It's just below where I want it to be. One thing to keep in mind is that until you've run the motor, you really can't get an accurate reading on the oil, because right now there's nothing in the engine. You've got to run it a little bit for it to pull some of the oil, because when you shut off the motor, the oil stops wherever it is. Well, the great part is I had already measured everything out the last time I did this. So 46 to 48 ounces is right in the sweet spot. So once we run the motor, we'll be able to check that. All right, next step here is to do your air filter, which is probably the easiest part of the whole process. Once you're captive, they stay right on this guard for the filter. Pop this up. There's our old filter. Now I've been a little bit of a bad tractor owner. I've never replaced this. Here's the new one, and you can see now they've got a pre-filter that just gets the worst of the stuff versus this is just an open filter. So the engine's going to breathe a lot cleaner and just probably a lot better at this point. Basically just pop it off like that. Now one thing you can do, and the camera is probably not going to pick this up, is you can look at how clean the inside of the filter is. The inside of this filter is actually very clean, so that's good. It means dirt wasn't sucked into the engine. The outside's obviously filthy, so we're gonna get rid of that. Take our new one, which has a very similar design underneath. Make sure the pre-filter is covering as much as we can. And basically press it on like so. Make sure it's got a good seal. And that's it. Now we put the guard back on. So the air filter literally takes a minute, 2 minutes. If I wasn't talking about it, I probably could have done it in 30 seconds. That's easy. All right, so one of the more challenging parts to do is replacing the fuel filter, which is this little guy right here. I can see right here that there's actually gasoline in it, so that's a little bit of a hassle. I've never changed the fuel filter on this. I never really thought about it, and since the air filter came with one, I might as well do it. One thing to keep in mind, you want gas to be flowing in here through the outside of the filter and then coming out the center versus the other way. So just keep that in mind because they are directional. It would probably work both ways, but this is the way that it's designed. So I've got these two little clamps that will be hose clamps for on here. Now the trick is, how do you take this off without spilling any more gasoline than you need to or want to? So the first thing is I'm putting some gloves on. I've got a rag from an old t-shirt that we're going to just keep handy. We've got a couple clamps. So probably the easiest way that I can think of is to clamp down so that no fuel can flow through that line. We'll find out if this works well in practice. Worst case, if it's crazy, I can just put a kink in it and that'll stop, just like your garden hose. But this is as tight as I can get it. All right, so I found a little bit easier way to do this. You can clamp things and take the little hose off, which then gives me better access to the main hose. And so that's what I ended up doing. So we're gonna do a little rocket surgery here. Try to drain this out as delicately as we can. One thing to mention, off camera, I pinched the line and then I ran the motor to drain all the fuel from the line that I could. It didn't drain everything, obviously, but it drained enough. Wow, that is on there. All right, we finally got our filter. Now we can compare. Oh, a little bit of fuel in there. We'll drain that out. So you can compare old and new. New one's bigger. The ends look about the same. Diameter is the same. So we're in good shape. Drain out a little bit of fuel there. This container that the fuel's in is actually clean. I cleaned it beforehand with a clean rag, and it didn't have any dust on the inside. So I'm just going to add this back to the gas tank afterwards. So minimize waste, minimize pollution. All right, so we've got our filter. As we said, we want the gas to go in on this side and out on the white side. So this is the line that goes out, and actually the existing hose clamps seem good. You always want to sort of check They can slide, but then once they grip, they really grip. So we're going to slide that down. I'm going to put our new filter here, snug it up as close as we can. Take the clamp, bring it all the way to the end. There we go, that's clamped. Next step, we're gonna do the same here. So a little twisting motion helps. And that goes on pretty easy. Take our clamp, slide it up. Make sure it's actually covered, has rubber sticking out on both sides. You don't want it right against because then it won't get as good a grip. I'm gonna actually loosen it for a second. So see how the curve here isn't gonna connect on where the carburetor is. So we're gonna twist. So it actually is oriented correctly. Well, fine tuning on my clamp. Then we're gonna slide this bad boy back on. All right, and our clamp is back on the carburetor, so our fuel lines are good. Look at that. Release the clamp, and now you can see the gasoline going through, which is good. So the clamp was the way to go. Irwin Clamps, shout out. All right, so the last piece here is we're gonna change out the spark plug. And I just made an interesting realization that the spark plug wrench I bought doesn't fit these spark plugs. It was too big. All right, so my DJI Osmo actually ran out of battery since I had been recording all of this stuff and then leaving it on in between what I was shooting. Not a big deal, recording on my phone now, and there's only a little bit left. So I have a 5/8 socket, which says spark plug, and it fits. So if you put that in there, the problem is this handle isn't very long. So I have this handy dandy extender from when I had some dirt bikes for motocross, and this will allow me to get quite a ways in with no problem. Hopefully. Wow, I might actually need a shorter one. Hang on. All right, so I have a shorter one, thankfully. I bought a 3-pack of them, Tecton, probably on Amazon. So now, there it goes. One of the reasons you do this last is because the engine's still hot from all the oil, and you want it to cool down while you're doing the other work. All right, so we've got our old spark plug, which has never been changed. We've got our new spark plug. And the trick here is you just basically look, probably most important is the spark gap about the same, and they look like they are to me. You can see that the head for the new spark plug is a little bit bigger. You're probably going to get a little bit better spark from it. So this actually may be an improvement. So we're going to pop this guy on the end of my socket. Make sure we've got our metal washers here. You can see the socket's right here. You can see as I'm tightening it. I'm doing it hand tight first. Take our socket, flip it to the other direction. Don't want to go crazy tight. Yeah, just enough that it's hand tight. That's all. Pull off the socket. And there we go. So we then take the spark plug cable, reconnect it on, and we should be good to go. All right. So now we see if it runs. Now one nice thing is that the engine is not making any smoke and it doesn't smell weird anymore, so that's good. No drips. Alright, so that's it. The motor is idling a lot smoother. It's not making any smoke or anything anymore. I don't have any leaks. And so that was pretty easy. But anyway, I will edit the hell out of this. I will post this whenever it's ready. This doesn't affect the Friday premieres of all the new videos for cars and bike stuff. Hopefully you guys find this interesting and helpful. And until next time, Fred out.